welcome back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I am your host, Sean McKinda.
And I am your host, Jackson Keller.
And it's another one of our lovely, lovely live streams where we do the whole recording in front of a quote-unquote live audience, or at least as live as Twitch can be, before wrapping it up with a Q&A session. These are always a lot of great fun, a lot of interesting things, and they're always about video games. And this month is no exception. Surprise, surprise. As we talk about a game that both of us probably should have played 10 years ago. I mean, probably we should have played it when it came out or a couple of years after. I mean, we would have been young when it came out. But we didn't, and we didn't, and we didn't until last month. We're like, hey, this came out on the Switch. Let's do it. So we're talking about Final Fantasy VII.
Well, it's funny because this is, like, one of the last... Like, there's a couple others, but, like, this is one of the last, like, finger quotes, like, GOAT classics that I haven't played. I usually make it a point to seek those kind of critically acclaimed games out, just if only for, like, historical purposes of, like, understanding the development of the medium and where the market shifted and changed and trended. So, like, when I say that I haven't played the game, that's a little inaccurate. I had played it before, like, for the first couple of hours, and reasonably enjoyed it. Like, in 7th grade, I had a friend. Like, this is a lot of my friends' like favorite game of all time. Like, you know, no question. It's a lot of people's favorite game of all time.
I was gonna say, that's not an unusual opinion.
Yeah. So, like, I always wanted to play it, and when I last played it on, like, the PS3, I remember thinking that I was enjoying it, but that a lot of the, particularly the dialogue really put me off, because the translation is not very good, and overall, there are a lot of important things that are either hard to follow or just hard to take seriously because they're kind of mangled in the moment to moment. But then when they announced the remake, I decided to give it another shot because debate was sort of raging about, like, all of the controversial, like, changes that they're making, like making it episodic, making it, like, real-time combat to the point where people are arguing it's not even going to be Final Fantasy VII anymore in all but name. And so I figured now would be as good a time as any to try the original again, and I downloaded the PS4 version. And when I say now, I mean, like, a couple of months ago. I had two big spurts where I played all the way through, like, the first disc and was really enjoying it. You know, the dialogue was still kind of crap, but I was being charmed by a lot of the other things that the game had to offer and really enjoying myself. And I didn't drop it for any, like, particular reason, mostly just life got in the way, and then I started pursuing other video game related projects, and it kind of went on the back burner. But when we needed a game to play for the show this month, since it was going to take us some time to do some Dangan 3. We don't want to go to Danganronpa 3 immediately after 2. So I suggested, well, hey, this just came out on the Switch. Sean, you've been playing it for a bit. Why don't we just do that then? And that'll get me off my ass to finally finish it. And it was worth finishing. I thought it was a really great game. Hasn't held up perfectly in more than one way. But
there's some flaws.
Overall, it's really charming. Like, even though the dialogue is really bad, like, the core story and characters are still pretty compelling. And it's more bold than I expected a game from 1997 to be, especially a big, famous game like this. I mean, you know, just even at the opening, you're playing as a bunch of eco-terrorists trying to take down, like, a, you know, cyberpunk corporation, committing bombings on reactors and shit like that. And like, that's the kind of stuff that I think really, it was bold then, and it still stands out as being very inspired today. So I think despite a lot of the more moment-to-moment hiccups, particularly, like, if I had to make one overarching criticism that's mitigated in the PS4 and the Switch versions by the inclusion of a speed up button, so it's not like they weren't aware of it.
Talk about that a lot.
Yeah, the game's pretty slow in more than one way. Like I said, the dialogue is still bad. It's kind of blows my mind a little bit that, you know, the Super Nintendo games translated by, oh god, what was his name? Ted Woolsey? Yeah, his translations weren't always the cleanest just because of what shitty conditions video game translators, particularly back then, had to work under. But it's amazing if you look at something like Chrono Trigger before, or even like Chrono Cross after this, and compare the quality of the translations and see that, like, one is coherent and fun and full of energy with the occasional hiccup, and the other is Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah. Kind of a little bit of my history with these games, more with RPGs in general. I'm not a huge RPG fan. I feel like it's really easy, even if I like the story, to get bogged down in grinding, which can just, you know, grind, pun not intended, the story to a halt, where like you just are like, oh no, we have to go save the world, but I have to go punch this gnome in the head 1,200 times to level up 3 more times. And so like that can get really frustrating for me. I think the reason I can play through the Persona games so well is because there's a driving time limit permanently on. So like they are as intentionally paced as they physically can be. There's no real downtime in them. That said, the inclusion of the 3x speed up in the re-releases, I played it on the Switch, is a godsend. If you are not an RPG fan, I recommend playing it with 3x speed on and not looking up how to run away from fights. You will generally, throughout the entirety of the game, end up being just enough over-leveled that your boss fights are still going to give you a little bit of trouble, but they're not going to be like ending of your time with the game. I think there were 2 bosses that I actually fought a couple of times, but like for the most part, I would just be like, all right, I'm going to strategize a little bit and I'll be fine. Barring all that, though, I still really liked it. I have a lot of the similar complaints as Jackson does, as we'll get into quite a bit, I am sure. But there's definitely some moments that just don't stick the landing due to translation, due to pacing issues. There's a lot of stuff about it that I do really like. There's some moment-to-moment bits that stick out really well. There's some overarching like story and theme bits that stick out really well. So like I can't even necessarily pinpoint that X is wrong with the game. Like I can't be like, well, the moment-to-moment sucks, because there are moment-to-moments that really work, and you know, same thing with the story. So it's tricky is what this boils down to. You're gonna have some highs, have some lows. Stay out of the golden saucer as much as you can. I thought that place fucking blew. There's just like little things like that. I think that's the other thing too, is the golden saucer sucked for me, and I think that's just because I couldn't get like my momentum going with it. I didn't want to sit there and do battles, but like even before you can do the battles, you're expected to wander around and explore everything. And you spend up time like, all right, I guess I'm gonna play these shitty ass mini games and win like 3 points at a time. So your mileage is gonna really vary with this game. I think it's worth checking out still. I would recommend it with some caveats going forward, just because, as I said, there's a lot of it that I am lukewarm on. But the combat I really liked. I think active combat is the best way you can do an RPG, just because it forces you to like still pay attention. 3x speed is an absolute godsend, especially because like the cutscenes even bog themselves down in a lot of places where it's just somebody running down a hallway for 30 seconds. And the summons are really long. They're cool, but they're also cool at 3x speed and don't take a minute and a half to do.
So, I guess to clarify, this is the first Final Fantasy game I've ever completed. While we're talking about our history with like RPGs and stuff, I generally really like JRPGs. I don't know about most of my favorite games, but a good chunk of my favorite games are JRPGs. But even by those standards, I think, yeah, like a lot of stuff is really slow, and you can see when there's stuff about this game that's dated. What I'm talking about isn't the fact that everyone looks like they're made out of like Duplo blocks.
They look like Roblox characters. Let's just not beat around the bush. They look like Roblox characters.
So like in the so they look like Fisher-Price toys in the overworld, but like in the battle scenes, like everything still looks really good. Like the character models are really detailed, and the animations are cool, and it all looks like about as good as you could expect like a PS1 game to look.
Oh yeah, no, there's still a lot to really say for the graphics.
Yeah, like there's a lot of style, there's a lot of panache, and I think like that carries over to the summons, which are like, I mean, I think. It's kind of crazy that the animations are so long for something that if you choose, you could use in every single battle, because like you'd expect like the big epic animations.
Absurd.
So like, yeah, they're really cool the first time you see them, and usually what I do is I'd let them play on normal speed the first time, and then every time after that speed them up.
I forgot about them half the time just because I was just like on 3x speed, mashing just physical attacks and winning most battles anyway. So I'd be like, I don't really need to worry about summons. I would only use them in bosses.
I pretty much only used them in bosses too. But yeah, but the thing is that, so much of the game you can see when I talk about like kind of dated design choices, it's more about the fact that the FMVs were a big selling point, and that like, what's still like kind of cool and kind of stylish to us, like would have been like absolutely mind-blowing. And you can see that, in the cutscenes, there's kind of three kinds. You have just regular dialogue between the Mr. Men. You have the, Mr. Men models put into a more elaborately animated pre-rendered cutscene, and then you have the full, like, basically anime cutscenes with, like, how the characters are actually supposed to look, like, with the ending and with the famous spoiler, which I think is one of the reasons the famous spoiler is so like, famous and well-remembered, just because of how much more detailed it was compared to a lot of the other scenes in the game. And yeah, so when I say that it's dated, I'm not just talking about the like PS1 graphics, which, I mean, there are just some people who can't tolerate that, and if you can't tolerate that, you're not going to be able to tolerate everyone looking kind of silly. But I think that as far as like helping the game hold up, it works in its favor, because the serious scenes and like the battles and the stuff that's supposed to be cool still looks cool because it's more detailed and pre-rendered, but like in a lot of the goofier sections or a lot of the fun like side quests, because this game has a reputation for being edgy, and it is, but it's not edgy all the time, which is important.
It also, I think, doesn't have the same edginess that it did in 1997 anymore. Like, the whole thing, you could see where it at one point was edgy, but like it's kind of diminished just as graphics has gotten better. Like, that is just an unfortunate element of the aging.
Graphically, and like some of the other things, like the fact that characters swear, but they swear like comic strip characters, where like ampersands and pound signs will be used to censor. And so that's hilarious, and it makes the dialogue even more difficult to understand. I
was gonna say, I'm assuming you're referring also to like the themes are kind of edgy for the time period, and like even today.
Yes, I was gonna say the themes are kind of edgy now. Like I think that.
Yeah. No, for sure. I'm just like, I was more, looking at it from the aesthetic side of things, which is, it's definitely not that same edge.
No, and a part of it is also the reputation. When I talk about edge, I'm talking a little bit about the reputation, because like culturally, like Cloud Strife as a character is seen as like the prototypical sad boy, like I'm gonna sit here and cry all the time because I'm a Final Fantasy protagonist.
Oh,
and, like,
especially his Kingdom Hearts model where they give him Vincent's golden glove and he's got like one black wing.
yeah.
And, oh,
I can be your devil or your angle. But yeah, like the actual game, I mean, like, sure, like his character has like angst, but especially like later on, but I'd say it's like fully justified by the story. Like, it's not, he's not out here like whining for no particular reason. Like, he's got a coherent character and arc. So when I say edgy, I don't just mean in that like the content is or is not challenging, which I would say in a lot of ways that it is, but just that, like, I think when like a game this famous has reputation for like, oh, you got a sad boy protagonist, and like, you know, oh man, you got Vampire Vincent who's like emo and stuff. I think a lot of that comes from the like spin-offs and sequels, truth be told, which I'm not familiar with, mostly like just by, again, kind of by reputation. But like as far as the original game is concerned, there's still a lot of kind of classic Square Soft, I should say, not even Square Enix.
I was gonna say it's Square Soft still. That was weird to see.
And I mean, there is a marked difference between a Squaresoft production and a Square Enix production, I think, having experienced not a ton of both, but like having played both this and a decent chunk of Final Fantasy 15. I mean, there's definitely a difference, and I think the fact that like guys like Sakaguchi and the original creators were still around and hadn't splintered off and formed their own studios, I think you can really see that there's a very particular ethos. It's driven by a very particular set of themes and ideas, and
they also just really liked airships.
They really like airships.
Because like I actually, funnily enough, I have played the first couple Final Fantasies to completion. Like, I have won the first couple Final Fantasies, which is just wild if you know anything about me or like have been listening since the beginning of the episode.
Yeah. I forgot that you had played the first one. Like, that is kind of crazy to me.
It's just like, if you can put me in front of a Final Fantasy and say, here, this is a button that makes the game go faster, I am all for it. Because I like these games in theory. I just get so bogged down with like the trite level to level stuff. Like, I like, you know, I'm even for random encounters if I can speed them up. I just don't like it when I have to, you know, I run for a minute and then I spend 30 seconds in a random encounter. When that's broken down into 30 seconds and then a 5-second random encounter, I'm into it. Like, that's the pace that I want from it. So I'm kind of, I think I'm kind of weird in that way, just like as far as Final Fantasy and RPG fans go. But I think like there's also a subset of people who are like, no, you know what? I get that.
So I've actually been thinking about this quite a bit. In that I think this is another way in that the game shows its age in a way that you might not expect, especially compared to even like the NES and the Super Nintendo ones. Because like I was thinking a lot about Chrono Trigger, of which there are a lot of parallels to draw between the mechanics and even the plot and themes. Like, they have a different approach, but a lot of the beats are the same. So they and I've heard that Final Fantasy VI, which I do also want to play, since that's the kind of the classic debate whether 6 or 7 is better, like the Zelda, like Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time debate. But you know, so that is even more similarities apparently. But the thing is that in those old 2D games, the speed of the overworld was so much less of an issue. I mean, particularly in Chrono Trigger, because the encounters are paced and there are no random encounters. But like how it'll work here is that there will just be one long hallway that like without speeding up, it will take you literally like 3 or 4 minutes to go across, which
the hallways in this game are wild.
And that's because it's not like, so in Chrono Trigger, an area is designed, you know, from a traditional top down, and so you can cover a lot more ground very quickly, like even compared to. Oh,
actually, really quick, you actually can turn off random encounters in the new like ports of this game. Don't do it.
Yeah, I'm always a little torn on stuff like that, even with the speed up. Like, part of me wants to I mean, this is just a whole can of worms of criticism that we're not going to solve here as far as like going back and experiencing old things. I tend to be a purist. I tend to want to like see the original version and like see how it's working in the context of its time period, but that's just like my own little thing. But
I mean, the whole thing there is that you have a more heavy focus on video games and understanding them as a medium, and like appreciating that. Whereas like my attention is way more split across a lot of media. So like for me, I have no issue with speeding through it because I still get by and large the same experience, especially with something like Final Fantasy VII, where I don't feel like I lost anything by going at 3 times speed. Because
no, and I definitely utilize the speed up function, like not nearly as much as you, but quite a few times.
There were times that I would run into like overworld obstacles and just not be able to get past them, be like, what the fuck is going on? Why is this so hard? Start to look it up, realize that there are no guides for it. I'm like, all right, then I must just be doing something. Oh, I'm on 3 times speed. Turn it off and walk through it. And you go, oh, that was the whole problem.
And so, all that's to say that, like, you know, regardless of like the 3 times speed, I think that removing the random encounters is maybe a bridge too far, and that like it's removing a pretty core element of the game at that point. So I don't know how I feel about that, but anyway,
I mean, even beyond just a core element, I think like it adds a decent bit of tension in certain times. Like there was a boss that I want to talk about this boss basically as soon as we end spoilers, more than anything because I think this is a funny story.
Sure.
But like it can be frustrating, but I think that like that frustration is there to keep you on your toes in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so I think the random encounters are appropriate, and I mostly agree.
Especially when you can put 3 times speed on. Like there's no excuse at that point.
But I think that like where the game starts to show its age in that regard is just that. So like, you know, top down you can cover a lot of ground very quickly, and the areas are pretty condensed, but here, because so much of it's about the spectacle of 3D, like instead of having like one kind of room that'll be like a particular labyrinth before moving on to the next, you'll just have several screens of like camera angles of you like running into or out of the camera on a long path to give like that feeling of scope that they would have wanted to convey, because now that they had 3D and like those pre-rendered backgrounds, but like obviously are not really impressive anymore, and mostly end up feeling completely tedious compared to like the 10 seconds it would take to walk down a hallway in Chrono Trigger versus the like 10 minutes it takes to walk down some hallways in Final Fantasy VII. So
well, do you want to move into spoilers at this point? I think we've pretty much we've talked about our experiences with the game more than enough at this point. Like we're basically just being like, well, here's how the game design works in modern era versus 1997, which is fascinating, but not necessarily the subject of the podcast.
No, yeah, I'm good for that. Let's there's a lot of stuff I really want to talk about here. I think that there's a lot of good meat to sink my teeth into, so I'm excited.
Cool. Well, before we do, next week we're gonna release our usual episode at the usual time. We're gonna be talking about Brightburn, a movie no one asked for in a time frame that no one wanted it. But you know what? Who knows? I haven't seen it yet. It could end up being really good. It could be interesting. I generally trust James Gunn as a director, although he's not directing it, he's producing it. I think it's like his other brother that's not Sean Gunn that wrote and is directing it. We'll see how it is. I'm tired of Superman but bad stories. It looks good. I just don't want that again.
See, I thought from the trailer it looked kind of like Man of Steel, but worse. Like the Smallville sections from Man of Steel, but with What If Superman bad. So
we'll see what happens. That said, though, let's talk spoilers.
So why don't we get into your tale right off the bat while we're still phasing out of like gameplay experiences.
The Proud Clod fight. First of all, Proud Clod is probably the best name for anything in this game.
I fucking love the names and the monster designs. Like that house you fight in Midgar, that shit's whack, and I love it.
So happy when I went back to Midgar to go get Tifa's ultimate weapon. and I could fuck that house up because that house fucked me up a couple of times. But no, the Proud Clod. So I had an adventure with the Proud Clod because the first time I went through it, I went in, I fought it, and I won. And it wasn't super hard, but then I didn't think to heal because, there's a boss fight, then you go to the next room, and it's almost always a safe room where you can save, heal, all that good stuff. Walk to the next room, and there's that tank, that fucking tank that just fucks your shit up if you're not prepared for it. So I died, and I'm like, all right, well, that sucks, but, Proud Clod wasn't a hard fight. I didn't even use any summons on it. So next time I went through, I used summons on it this time, and I beat it even faster. I'm like, all right, cool. This time I'm gonna save up. I'm gonna heal up. All right, let's go fight this guy. And I walk into the fight with the tank. I attack him twice. I use a summon, and my game crashes. So at this point, I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. So then I go fight the Proud Clod a third time, and I actually make it through with no problem this time. But it was not the best experience.
The Proud Clod. God damn it. All right. So we're a death podcast. We talk about death. Do we want to talk about the famous spoiler? Do we want to talk about Aerith? I'm just gonna call her Aerith since that's the default. I think that's not right. Whatever.
Yeah.
Who
All right.
cares?
Before we do, why is some places it's Aerith, some places it's Aerith?
I'm assuming that's like a katakana translation thing, like the Nibelheim thing we were talking about, how like Japanese language doesn't have enough syllables and like you can interpret it one of two ways while translating it to English. I mean, I think Aerith sounds better than Aerith, so that's what I'm going to call her, but I guess Aerith is correct.
Yeah, all right, well, let's talk about that then, because like that is the big spoiler, and like obviously we can talk more about like the nitty gritty and then the themes at the end. That feels like a good pathing.
Hell yes, a long path, a long bridge,
like a long fucking hallway where things just keep attacking you, and you just want to move to the next room, and then you have to fight the Proud Clod again.
So I guess like we said we didn't want to focus too much on gameplay experiences, but I think it's relevant here just because that's a spoiler that basically everybody knows. I know that there's some conversation with like the remake on whether or not that should be treated as common knowledge, but like culturally speaking, everyone knows that. That's like saying that Sheik is Zelda. That's not a controversial thing, even though it was like a big deal back in the day. So what do you do then? Like, I feel like most people's impulse when they play it now, for people like us who didn't play it back in the day and are experiencing it for the first time or even just replaying it, I'm like, the impulse I'm sure is just like, take Aerith, throw her in the bin. Like, that's just gonna be wasted EXP. like fuck that. Gonna drag us down. But I actually went out of my way to use her just so like maybe my video game like habits reveal that I'm some sort of like insane sociopath trying to recreate what these human beings call emotions.
I mean, go listen to our Danganronpa episode if you want to confirm that one.
But so I played I ended up playing Aerith with my party throughout pretty much the whole first half of the game. My core crew ended up being, because when I play JRPGs, I usually stick to like a couple of characters. My core crew ended up being, of course, Cloud, since, with the exception of when he's out of commission, you can't get rid of him. You have, I ended up having Tifa, because she's best girl, and then after Aerith's death, I had Red 13 because genetic super doggos, and before I had Aerith, just to try and replicate the feeling of not necessarily, I mean, I guess of loss, because part of the reason that it was such a big deal is that character deaths in JRPGs are about not just like the loss and the story, but they're really meant to be driven home by the loss mechanically, that you did invest so much time like powering them up and getting her ultimate limit break and like specking her out to be like your best magic user or something like that. And then Sephiroth comes and, you know, impales her from the sky. And then that's that. You can't use her at all anymore. Nothing will fix it. And that, I mean, that's a super cool thing that games can do. Like, I can, you know, obviously I'm not going to spoil, but I think of a few other RPGs that do this. And I think that, even though, like, Aerith was not my favorite character or not the most interesting character, I did end up liking her. I liked that, she had a little bit of spunk, and I actually, like, you know, between the two main girls in the game, I liked that their personalities weren't what you would expect, like, looking from their character designs, because Aerith looks very, like, regal in their long flowing dress and her magic staff, and Tifa has, like, the gloves and you know, looks like a real bruiser and fights with her fists, so, like,
and sometimes Tifa doesn't even match her own personality, because that feels like it shifts wantonly sometimes.
Really? I mean, like in that one, I thought it was pretty consistent aside from that one.
Specifically at the slap fight on top of the cannon.
That was cringy.
That was absurd and had no right to be there. Because, like, Tifa has been just as badass this whole time. Then all of a sudden she's like, you're another woman, so I'm gonna slap you. And I'm like, game.
That was it's so funny because otherwise she's such like a well-rounded character and like has a lot of like depth to her once you start like uncovering some more of her feelings and her backstory. But yeah, I mean, it definitely has those moments. I thought you were talking about the other one where she chides Barrett with the R word for
yeah, that one's in there too, because Barrett, like, at one point if you take a certain path early on when you're infiltrating Shinra, you can go up the stairs or you can go in forward, and if you go up the stairs, at one point Barrett's like, I hope Marlene's okay, this girl that is basically my daughter, and a bunch of really traumatic shit just happened to her, and Tifa just like, don't be such an R word, and I'm just like, pardon me?
Mon Dieu.
Yeah, so there's some inconsistent character. I mean, everyone has, though, but for Tifa just stood out to me mostly because of the slap fight on the cannon. Well, it's like a worse shirtless fist fight from Metal Gear.
Oh my god. Well, it's so funny because, like, you know, the whole game, like, you know, especially, oh my god, like, her limit breaks are so busted too, and it's just like, you know, lifting up like giant dragons and mechs with her bare hands and like suplexing them, and they started slapping each other. I'm like, how? That's actually kind of a problem in the cutscenes a lot. I mean, this is a not uncommon JRPG problem where they'll do these ridiculous overpowered attacks, like Sephiroth will blow away the solar system and, like, you know, Pidgey fainted or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you know, they'll be locked by handcuffs and stuff. Like, how did Tifa not rip this like femme fatale lady in half? Like, how did she not just suplex her and be done with it?
Who knows? Let's talk about Aerith. This is way off base.
Yeah. So what I was saying is what I liked about Aerith is that you would expect kind of the like flirty, spunky one to be Tifa, 'cause, you know, the more rough and tumble looking one, and the like sweet, more demure one to be Aerith. But it ends up not playing out that way. It ends up you don't get a ton of time.
Oh, that was a translation accident. Actually, they're supposed to be flipped. That's a joke. I'm kidding.
You know what? I wouldn't be that shocked.
I was gonna say, your silence there, I'm like, oh no, he's buying it. That was meant to be a joke. Laugh. Please laugh.
But please clap. But yeah, so I think that, like, giving her that role, like, gave me enough to like care about. Like, not that I was like devastated over losing her, of course, and part of that is just that, you know, what was once shocking is no longer shocking.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, I when Jackson said that he was using Aerith as in his party, even though knowing the twist, I'm like, you know, I like that idea. Let's try and build the attachment to her to see the same thing. it didn't stick as well for me. Like, I never had the same attachment to Aerith as other people might have. Like, there's just a bunch of stuff that kind of, it didn't necessarily jive with me in the right way. Like, the big thing that sticks out to me is when you're in the Golden Saucer and she just randomly drags you out on a date. And it just felt so out of the blue and so strange that I'm like, what is her character trying to do here? So I don't know. Her whole death thing, I think, removed, like, with knowing the spoilers, removed 20 years down. It lost a lot of its impact from that. I feel like even if I hadn't known the spoilers of the death, despite not necessarily being the hugest fan of Aerith, I probably would have still like been surprised and enjoyed the death, but enjoyed the death as much as you can. So I don't know. Aerith's death 20 years down the road it's an interesting question.
And I think it's still a well done scene too. Like especially how the like white materia bounces and that ends up like coming back later, and again the fact that it's given the full Nomura character design anime treatment gives it a lot of weight. I like that there is the build up, which I imagine would have been really effective if it wasn't so famous, of like it looking like Cloud's getting Sephiroth and is going to go do it himself before he breaks the control, and then they yank back on the choke chain and Sephiroth just comes and does it himself.
Yeah, no, like there's a lot about the scene to like. It just, when you know it's coming, it manages to lessen itself.
Yeah. So, but what I really like about it, what I think does still hold up, even knowing the twist, is that the consequences of that loss, like they're not constantly like angsting about it, but when it comes up, they deal with it in that sense of loss and that sense of regret in a very appropriate way, I think. And just I really like that the finale of after Sephiroth has summoned Meteor and everything's gonna be blown up unless they do something about it. I like that it comes back around to like even though she died, that her what her legacy, like what she started to put in motion in order to like help save everything, is like what they end up seizing upon, that last bit of hope that she kind of left them. And I'm not definitely, and we're going to talk about this a bit more in terms of like broad themes, I'm definitely not someone who would consider themselves in any way spiritual, which is one way that I differ philosophically from this game very much. But even I was a little touched by the sentiment of like, her essence is like still in the life stream, like return to the planet. It's well thought out. It's nice. It fits in with the overall story and themes really well, and it plays an important part.
The ripples of her death are very effective, even knowing the spoilers. Because like I think that's the other thing too, is I just in general with spoilers, I knew a lot of how the story played out thanks to a variety of pop culture media that has talked about this game, and yet there's no way anyone can talk about all of it in even an hour-long podcast. Like, we're gonna gloss over so much. There's maybe one or two character bits before we dive into like the themes of the game, but like there's a shit ton that we're not even gonna even remotely cover that is really interesting. Like, we're not going to talk about Yuffie at all. I'm going to mention that I used Vincent and that his whole side thing with Lucretia is really interesting, and that fighting Hojo with the Hojo boys, Cloud, Red 13, and Vincent's kind of cool because they'll have a little bit more specialized dialogue for the fight. But like, what does that mean? You don't know. You won't know if you don't go play it. So like, it's a really dense game in a good way.
And I meant to bring this up back even in the like pre-spoiler discussion, is that like, yeah, like a lot of the mini games surrounding the Gold Saucer are fucking terrible, and a lot of it's a waste of time. But what I do appreciate about the game in general is just how much of that stuff they included. Like, there is
the fact that it's even there.
there's that. There's like the ultimate weapons. There's like the limit breaks. Finding the special summons like Knights of the Round and stuff. There's so much that you could do, like if you were so inclined and so taken with this world. And I think that there's
going after ultimate weapon though.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to imagine if I was a kid in 1997 with only 2 games on my PlayStation.
I did it.
You did? Why?
I did it. Yeah. Because I'm like, I was interested. Like, I'm like, all right, because I have a limited time here. Like, I had to basically choose what I wanted to do. And I'm like, I want to get the ultimate weapons for my 3 main party. I want to get Red 13, Vincent's, and I want to get Cloud's ultimate weapon. And the ultimate weapon fight didn't sound that bad. I just wasn't expecting to spend... thankfully, 3 times speed helps a lot with this, too. But it still probably took me 20 minutes to do the whole thing. And without 3 times speed, that would have been an hour of just flying across this map trying to find it. That would have been miserable.
No, I didn't bother with any of that. Although I will say that like one thing that I think is particularly cool is that the weapons, the various weapon monsters. It's a big plot point that like the planet has kind of its own natural defense system when things go awry, and that it's summoning these gigantic kaiju just to like fight back against Sephiroth and Meteor.
They look like Godzilla monsters. Like some of them just look like Godzilla.
Yes, but most of them are completely optional. There's like 2 mandatory fights with them and a really cool sequence where one of them gets blown the fuck out by a cannon, and but otherwise like they are like optional side things, which I feel like is a really interesting choice that I appreciate.
I wouldn't see a couple of them. Like I know there's a red weapon that I didn't even run into.
Yeah, I didn't run into that one either. I tried to fight the green one under the sea and got absolutely toasted. So
you know what? I saw it. I'm like, I'm not even gonna fuck with that thing. That's gonna be way too hard. Let's talk little character moments. Like what just small things that people don't talk enough about with this game. Like what stands out to you?
Red 13 and his back. He's not that sad, but like he's got a cute little backstory. Like one of the reasons I like JRPGs is
the
that
Lion King.
Is it the Lion King?
It's
really?
Kind of the Lion King.
Is it?
Kinda. Let me make my joke.
All right. Well, because I don't know. I was genuinely touched. That was a nice little character arc of him like thinking that his dad was a cowardly piece of shit who ran out on him, and like seeing his petrified body like covered in arrows in his last stand, and like
that's a cool scene. That's a fucking cool scene. Yeah.
Yeah, and him like howling, and he's a sad doggo, and it's great. And the fact, I gotta say, it's super weird.
I might just be a dumb who like, oh, lions, Lion King.
But no, I gotta say, justice for Nanaki, because it's really weird that like you just keep calling him by his Hojo number, and like that never changes, and it's never dealt with. It's not even like he just says like,
give us an option to change it.
Or even like in story being like, oh, like I've been so experimented on, like I don't identify with the name Nanaki anymore. But that's not at all the case when he goes home. He's like, Grandpa, I'm so happy to see you again. Hooray. And they're like, oh, Nanaki, you sweet baby. And yet everyone keeps calling him by his experiment serial number. It's pretty fucked up.
Like they mentioned that a little bit when you get him. He's like, names have no meaning to me anymore. I'm grizzled and hardened. And then like it's a flip there, which the flip makes sense. But like, why? Just give us the option to change the name. Like, give the player, when it's like his name is Nanaki, the option to rename him to Nanaki, because I would like to do that. Please and thank you.
Or even if it just like, I guess it's just because like they don't want to, like all the Square RPGs let you name all your party members. Even weirdly, that's a different thing. That's a spoiler for a different game. That's so. Yeah. So like. I would have thought it was cool if like after that moment, like after his little segment, like the game overrode whatever name you gave him to start calling him by his real name again. That would have been nice, but I understand why they didn't do that.
Yeah, for sure. My big thing is just the one little thing that I want to give a cute little shout out to is some of Barrett's moments. Not Barrett as a whole, because Barrett as a whole falls flat in a lot of places. But there's a moment towards the end where he's like wrestling with the actions of blowing up that reactor at the beginning of the game and like acknowledging that he killed a lot of people in doing so. That I think is really heartfelt and interesting. And when you fall out of when you get kicked out of the golden saucer, and Barrett's going on a rampage, is all mad and stuff. You end up like talking to Dine, who is the guy that basically he was arguing about with actual Coral as to whether they should give it up to Shinra and like Marlene and everything like that. And it's really cute. It's not cute, but it's really heartfelt and it's really interesting. And then it ends with Dine throwing himself off a cliff that is rough to watch. It's a really good moment. Coral Prison, as far as random encounters goes, can kiss my ass because they're just a bunch of thieves and dudes who blow themselves up. But as far as story goes, it's really good.
I mean, Barrett is the biggest victim of the dialogue. Because, like, if at his core, like, if you look at his character beats, if you look at his moment, like, he is a solid, like, fleshed out, like, fully realized character that grapples with a lot of, like, a lot of, like, really, like, human, like, understandable stuff. The fact that he's the leader of Avalanche, that he is, like, the founder of this eco-terrorist organization, that the game actually grapples with the morality of taking an action like that in its own way. Again, pretty bold, but so like here's a good example. Here's a famous line is that like early on when you're still in Midgar, like blowing up reactors and stuff, they try to explain the structure of Midgar to make a plot point later that still was pretty shocking. What?
Is your question what the fuck is the structure of Midgar?
Yeah, so
no idea.
So, but the problem is because the line of dialogue that Barrett gives is, if it wasn't for that fucking pizza, everyone here wouldn't be suffering. And I'm like, Barrett, what are you talking about? Like, I literally read that line like 5 times just to see what like try to understand. But like what he was actually talking about is that was planting the seeds for when Shinra decides they're going to take care of their avalanche problem by blowing up the plate over the city and crushing everyone underneath it. And that's a really brutal moment. And like, again,
you can never see a fucking plate in any of the images of Shinra of fucking Midgar. I looked at that fucking picture of Midgar for so long trying to see the Undercity, and I'm like, so like they keep talking about it being a floating city, and I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? What is going on? So yeah, I don't understand the shape of how Midgar works at all.
No, and I suspect that the dialogue is the main culprit, and Barrett gets it the worst because he talks in this like really stereotypical racist like black accents. God, it's embarrassing, and I don't know how much of it is like the translator's fault and how much of it is like the original dialogue's fault, because obviously Japan's got racism problems. So who can say? I'm willing to believe either one is true. But yeah, so Barrett's like a good character ruined by the dialogue, basically.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about themes. This is gonna be a long episode as it is, because we haven't even it's been like 45 minutes and we haven't even started the Q&A shit yet. So
yeah.
Let's talk themes. Specifically, I'll let you talk this because you're like the general themes of kind of anti-capitalism blending into anti-humanity. That was not anything, please God.
Post-humanism, let's call it.
Yeah, that'll work. That's a way better way of saying whatever the hell I was trying to get to come out of my mouth. Are pretty well documented, as well as the global warming, climate change stuff. But there's elements of it. I think that the themes come through pretty clearly, and I think they're pretty interesting, but there are elements of it that you don't like, I believe.
So, to be clear, I think that the themes of this game, in fact, it's a testament that like I enjoyed and resonated with the game as much as I did, because like philosophically, from where the game like sits, I'm pretty far from what its kind of core beliefs seem to be. But the fact that it is so bold, that it is so clear in its vision, and it makes a statement while still, like, kind of like you said with that scene with Barrett, like, it doesn't ignore, like, you know, sort of the complications in its own worldview. And I think that just the conclusion that the game comes to is different from my own in a way that is kind of rooted in the spiritualism that I, like, generally in life I have a distaste for, but as, like, an art piece, it's coming through so clearly and everything falls together so nicely that, like, it still presents compelling things for me to think about and consider. And I think that with the whole climate change issue being now more pressing than ever, like, the game's, you know, addressing of that and the problems of, like, science and humanity's impact on the planet are have aged better than ever. So, like, particularly we're talking about the ending, and I'm looking at this just as Final Fantasy VII. I'm not taking into consideration, like, Crisis Core or Dirge of Cerberus or Advent Children or whatever, because that seems to run counter to what the original ending was. And I did, you know, the ending's purposefully kind of ambiguous, and it was colored by some outside sources and just, like, word of mouth about how the game basically ends in an apocalypse, but it ends in an apocalypse in a very, very particular way. So when they're getting the white materia, the runes and oh god, what is his name? Floating Grandpa.
Oh, yeah, Floating Grandpa is a fine name.
Yeah. So Floating Grandpa's even like, so if you use the white materia, that'll be enough to take care of everything. That'll take care of Sephiroth, that'll take care of Meteor, that'll take care of all of this strife and all of this hardship. But the planet is basically going to purge itself of what it sees as a negative influence. Like, the consciousness of the planet, of the life stream, is going to make the call over whether humans are worthy to keep going. And the game's conclusion, based on this and the fact that we see Midgar, like, in 500 years later, no humans around, completely overtaken by greenery, the conclusion seems to be that humans are not worthy. And this fits with, like, you know, the whole, not just anti-capitalist, but like, science sort of point of view that it has of, like, if you think about Sephiroth, his motivations, like, can be a little unclear because he's kind of an unreliable narrator when explaining himself and what he believes. But what we come to learn about him is that he's basically a science experiment, born from, you know, trying to fool around with alien life.
Actually, Sephiroth was the monster, or was the scientist. Sephiroth's monster is who you're thinking of.
I'm gonna Aerith you with a giant katana in my house. So like, Sephiroth is basically, like, his role as a villain increasingly becomes clear in that, like, him and Hojo are, like, the epitome of, like, they're Shinra taken to the next level, like, the destructive influence of mankind, of finger quotes, like, progress, of science. Like,
I really want more about Hojo, just as a quick aside, just because I thought Hojo was really interesting, but I don't think he got fleshed out enough. Sorry, continue.
No, I agree. But so Sephiroth, like, he wants to, like, corrupt the life stream, basically, and, like, it's the science ruining Earth analogy taken to its logical conclusion. And the conclusion that it comes to is that, well, you know, we may have all these sympathetic qualities, and we may have, like, there may be good people, there may be people trying their hardest, but in the end, you know, in the grand, like, spiritual sense of the cosmos, the planet would be better off without humanity. Now, where I take issue with this is again, on like a personal philosophical level, is that I most certainly do not see things from a post-human perspective, because I am a human and I would like to continue living.
But you live in a society. How can you criticize society?
Very astute, Sean. So, and again, it's not that I think the game is ignoring the complexities, which is why I'm still giving it praise, even though, like, I make no pretense of, like, heaping scorn upon works of art that disagree with me philosophically. But in this case, it's that spirituality aspect that, like, I sort of take issue with, because I do hear this rhetoric in real life that, like, about climate change, and that, oh, you know, man, it's like humanity's the virus and global warming is the fever come to, like, get rid of the poison. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, man, there is no, like, Mother Earth. It's a rock with some water that life accidentally happened to. And yes, climate change is a problem, and yes, it's sad that, you know, animals are dying and species are going extinct and there's going to be all these ramifications, but it's not like the planet itself has, like, a personality or an impact. Like, we only feel sad about the animals because we like the animals, and we've decided that as a society, well, maybe we haven't decided, maybe that's part of the problem, but we've decided, like, as a
society has decided.
Yeah, we've decided that we care about them, and so, like, it's not that, like, I don't think I'm so far removed from the game that, like, I can't see its points or what it's talking about, but that it's so rooted in the spiritual angle is where it kind of loses me, because and I guess, like, the fact that it's so, like, the game is pretty anti-science in a lot of ways, and it's not unfair about it. It's not, it acknowledges, like, particularly I'm thinking about the scene where, Weapon is, like, charging towards Midgar, and, like, some characters like, well, you know, whatever, like, let Shinra deal with it, who cares? They're like, well, shit, man, like, just because, you know, Shinra's in Midgar doesn't mean there aren't a bunch of, like, oppressed people in the slums that are gonna get absolutely, like, you know, horribly killed because of this weapon. We gotta go take care of it. So there is some balance and stuff like that I think makes the game strong from a narrative perspective, because if you're gonna deal with complex issues, you should think about them complexly. And it even points out that, like, so I guess where it starts to lose me is that whole subplot about the huge materia. I never understood why it was so bad in this case to let Shinra have it and just try to blow it up even if it didn't work. It seemed like a small sacrifice to make in the face of literal extinction. So I never understood why we were making such a big deal out of saving it from Shinra. It's like, especially when, like, their Armageddon asteroid rocket plan, for all we know, could have worked. So where it gets to me is that, like, I guess, like, and this just applies to the whole climate change, like, science conversation, is that, you know, yes, like, climate change is going to have and is having, like, disastrous effects on people, and it is caused by technology, caused by science primarily, but on the other hand, like, that science, that technology, and that progress is what makes being alive worth it, man. Like, if we didn't
and also is currently counteracting it too. It's not necessarily the fault of science that we've ended up where we are. It's, you know, the capitalist ideas, taking it to the logical extreme and just exploiting it for everything it is. It's not necessarily science's fault, and as a matter of fact, science has done more good than harm.
No, I mean, like, exactly. That's what I was going to say. Like, the way that I see it is that, like, the products of, like, technology and science, like, are mostly, like, in the grand scheme of things, are gonna be, like, mostly neutral. Like, it's up to us to, like, deal with, like, the consequences and keep using sort of these methods to try and solve these problems, because that's, I mean, realistically, that's the only thing we could do at this point. Like, sure, we could shut down and, you know, abandon all technology and go back to being, like, Westeros or something, but I don't want to fucking do that. And so, like, surely it makes more sense to figure out, like ways to reduce carbon emissions, ways to, convert all the greenhouse gases. Like people are working on that kind of stuff, lab grown meats. So people can still have their feasts and their traditions without the like methane, producing effects of the agricultural industry. Like if we are gonna like get out of this situation or even like reduce its effects, like we gotta push forward with the science stuff, man. We can't just say the planet's more important than us, because the planet doesn't have a personality, and that's sort of my philosophical gripe. It's not a flaw with the game per se. It's just that me and it don't see eye to eye.
I mean, Sid does. I will say, just in defense, Sid does a nice role of playing the opposition of science in a way that doesn't really feel like he's wrong ever. It's just more of like, here's a different perspective on it. He's not incorrect in what he's saying, but for this media, the other way is the solution.
Yeah, no, and again, that's what I really, really appreciate about it. I suppose, like, I think if I had to, like, try and put the stance into words, it's that the fact that it considers all the complexities and includes those moments, like, I really, really appreciate the game on, like, an intellectual level. I think the story is really well thought out. I think that, like, on the macro level, it's really thematically sound. The characters are rich and have a lot of complexities. But, like, I think what keeps it... If I had more of that, like, spiritual point of view, like, this might be, like, one of my top 10 favorite games. As it is, I just think it's, like, rather brilliantly constructed in terms of narrative, and but it doesn't quite resonate with me in
as opposed to top 10. It is instead just very, very good.
Yeah, how dare it not be absolute 10 out of 10 masterpiece. But I think it's really great. I think it was well worth playing. I think that if you can, I know that some people just can't deal. I said earlier, if you just can't deal with N64, PS2, PS1 era graphics, I mean, this certainly isn't going to change your mind. But if you can, I think if you are like us and don't have any previous experience with this, it is worth experiencing. It even if it doesn't live up to the hype per se, it is a great experience in its own right,
especially at 3 times speed.
Like, especially at 3 times speed. Play one of the ports.
Yeah, the speed up really helps in a lot of places. That said, I think we're ready to open up for some Q&A.
I'm ready to open up for Q&A. Let's take a look at chat.
Cool. So welcome, chat. I see we have some faces that might not have been in one of these streams before. We generally ignore chat while we're actually having our conversation, but as soon as we wrap up the main part, we open it up to Q&A. So, like, if you have any questions on why we have bad tastes or why it took us 20 years to play this game, well, you missed the beginning of the stream because we did answer both of those questions. Well, actually, we answered one of them. The reason we have bad taste is because we just have bad taste. But other than that, though, we'll take basically any question you have about our experience with the game, thoughts on Final Fantasy as a whole, anything like that.
So I'm looking at the beginning just to see what people were saying. Big weirdo, can you bone in this game? The answer is actually kind of.
I was saying you do bone at the end there.
Cloud totally bones Tifa, which is great. Tifa's best girl. I ship it. I seriously though, I do really like their little stream in the light. There's a section in the live stream. Like, I like Cloud as a character. I think that he's got more going on than just being a brood boy. And I like that they sort of like work through their past, and like their childhood stuff is surprisingly down to earth. Like Tifa doing risky things because of the loss of her mother, and like Cloud being kind of the weird creepy kid who's got a crush on her, but like just doesn't really do anything about it and doesn't know her very well. Like that all rang pretty true for me. But as far as your actual question, that date with Aerith that Sean was talking about, my date ended up being with Tifa. So depending on how you influence the dialogues, depending on how you answer them, the date of the Golden Saucer can be with many different characters, including Barrett.
Oh shit, no way. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a big meme, but it's cool that they included it. I mean, it's the equivalent of in Persona 4 Golden, turning down all your Valentine's Day dates and spending the day with Yosuke and Teddy at the mall to hang out with your bros. Like, I don't know why you would do that, but you can.
Daybreak Fan 1996 asks, what do you think of Sephiroth as a villain?
Ooh.
I think if we could, I think the core idea of Sephiroth as a villain is really interesting. I like a lot of the stuff that he brings to the table. I kind of dig the edgy aesthetic in general, admittedly. The big ass sword I like. But I think that some of the stuff gets a little just bogged down in translation. Like, there are just times where I feel like I lost the plot of his plan.
Yeah, and so, like, for the record, because I spent so long between playing the first half of the game and the second half of the game, I had to go and, like, look up a lot of stuff again. Overall, I really enjoyed Sephiroth as a villain. A lot more than I expected to, just because, again, like, kind of the edgy jokes had been made, so I wasn't expecting to be that impressed. But I thought that, like, you know, as the pinnacle abomination of science, like Shinra and Hojo's like ultimate product, I think it worked very well. And I think that presence of him being like the legendary soldier, like the fallen hero that like Cloud and Tifa and the rest of them looked up to as kids, I think that worked very well. In fact, like I love that like Cloud just dabs on him with the Omni Slash at the end. Like, that was sick. But I kind of wish that I had gotten a real fight against human Sephiroth, just because, like Sean, I'm into the edgy design. So yeah, overall, I think he was a good villain. He served his role really well. I hated that fight with his first phase because I only leveled up Cloud, Tifa, and Red 13, so I didn't have two parties to manage.
I only ended up with one party anyway. I don't know how that worked out. I tried to look it up a little bit, and I did not understand why I only were given one party.
There was a lot of there were a lot of variables when I looked it up. So
yeah, all right, I got one. I'm not gonna try and figure out the math behind it.
I'm assuming one of the reasons I didn't end up having to do the 3-party thing is because I never got Yuffie. Were the battles difficult? No, I don't think so. They weren't like piss easy to the point of being boring, but they weren't like, they didn't tax me super much. Like, there were a couple of fights where I died, but most of the game went pretty smoothly. But there were, I think, even in some of the regular encounters, like when you get turned into frogs and shit, like there were enough curveballs that threw at you to keep the combat interesting. And I really liked like the gameplay, despite my qualms with the speed. The overworld is like the combat system is, you know, terrific. I love the amount of customization you can do with the materia, even if there's a lot of bookkeeping. Like, I ended up being very satisfying with my build. Like, it was really nice to, you know, forego magic on Tifa pretty much entirely and have her use a combination of like the cover and the counterattack materia to just like soak up damage and constantly be punching people. I'd use haste with Red 13 and kind of stacked him to be magic and Cloud to be a mix. Yeah, so I really enjoyed the combat in this game, even if it wasn't the most difficult. I'm imagined if I tried to like fight all the weapons and stuff, then my skills would be more tested. But yeah.
I only ran into 2 really difficult battles myself, which were Schizo and Hojo, both of which I probably only died maybe 6 times each max. So I never really, it always felt like the right level of difficulty for me, where like it kept me engaged, as Jackson was saying, but never oppressively like beaten down. I never really, I would still get a little nervous when I was trying to like find that save spot, like because I knew there'd be like an enemy or two out there that could theoretically come in and kick my teeth in if I got like the wrong setup. Like towards the end there, you got that dragon, that new Ultima that just would wreck your day if you were unprepared. So there was definitely some stuff out there that kept it. It was the right level of difficulty is really what it boils down to. Like basically across the board, it was never infuriating, but it was never easy either.
Yeah. So favorite and least favorite characters.
That's
good.
Godzilla versus Switch, I should say.
Oh yes, of course. So favorite and least favorite characters. That's actually kind of tough for me. You got an answer on this one immediately, or?
Oh God. I think my least favorite was probably Yuffie, just because she shows up, steals your materia. Oh no, I know who my least favorite's Kate Sith.
Yeah.
That one's an easy one actually, because I do not understand why we just decided to trust them again. Reeve, I guess. But it was wild that they're like, oh, okay, I guess we're friends with Kate Sith, and she's just along for the entire ride.
I like the idea. I think I tend to agree. I like the idea behind Kate Sith, in that like he's kind of this goofy like meme party member that you don't expect anything out of, and he turns out to be working for Shinra. But like the turn to why he ended up supporting us and why we trusted him, like that wasn't very well established. So yeah, I think I'm gonna agree with you there.
I did like, though, like it does tie into the whole thing with Barrett where he's talking about like saving people's lives. I did appreciate the like, well, that's why Kate Sith worked for Shinra, is to try and keep the people of Midgar alive. I thought that was, I like that moment.
Yeah, I think towards the end, like after, like if you can get over the weirdness of them just so readily trusting him again, I liked a lot of the stuff that he was doing and how like he'd be communicating with the party and like keeping up his role and giving intel. Like I liked him towards the end. So even though like he's probably my least favorite party member, I mean, yeah, he definitely still had some merits in the story. So.
Favorite though, I still really like Vincent. He's the right level of edgy and kind of cool backstory that he got me. He hooked me. Plus his limit breaks are fucking cool.
My favorite probably is Tifa actually. I like that something that's this is a bit of a personal maybe a bit of a personal gripe, is I think there's kind of this idea that like a character who's nice and sweet like can't be like a three-dimensional character, an interesting character, and I think that Tifa does a really good job, and that like, you know, she is like generally speaking like, you know, very nice, very sweet, like, you know, one of the less like morally gray characters, but I think that a lot of like the personal stuff in her backstory and like her relationship with Cloud really resonated with me. So she's probably my favorite, followed by Red 13 because animals.
Oh shit, there's a Final Fantasy VII playthrough from Team 4-Star that actually sounds like that'd be really enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, I'd actually been wanting to watch that, but, you know, I'd never played the original game, so now I can finally do that.
I just saw a Daybreak fan post. I'm like, wait, is that actually Team 4-Star? Because absolutely I'm going to go fucking find that. Any narrative changes from Big Weirdo that you'd make if you were in charge of the Switch remake?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, overall, like in terms of the broad strokes,
it's the translation.
I was gonna say really it's the dialogue. I think yeah, there might be some like occasional side adventures here and there that are kind of misfires, but overall in terms of the plot progression, I think that most of what's going on is really solid, and so yeah, change the translation, maybe. We were just talking about Kate Sith, maybe make that sort of like, make that a little clearer by the team so readily welcomes him back.
I honestly think it's just a lot of like little moments that need fleshed out.
Yeah.
Because like the overarching works pretty well. I've said this multiple times during the podcast. Like the overarching works really well. The moments to moments work really well. It's the in-betweens that just need a little bit more fleshing, like to kind of show the party interaction, show everything else that goes with it. Like, I think that's where it falls apart. Like, I said that I wouldn't be able to put into words, and I think I just did it.
I've got another one. I mean, I brought this up earlier, but the huge materia plot line, make it so like till the very end I didn't understand what the big deal about letting Shinra launch that stuff into space was. Like, I get that, you know, they're mining materia and Mako and that's killing the planet and that's bad, but surely as like a stopgap measure for a meteor that is going to instantly kill the planet, like it's a decent enough sacrifice. Like I didn't get the rationale for like stopping them on that. So that might be
just
one.
Just flesh it out.
Yeah, exactly.
I I mean, do you want to? Is there any like burning questions? We'll take maybe one or two more, but we're probably gotta start wrapping this up. It's a long one.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Out of the iconic FMVs, which is your favorite? Sephiroth killing Aerith, the destruction of Sector 7, or Sephiroth removing the cover of Genova?
Ooh. I was a pretty big fan of Sephiroth removing the cover of Genova. I liked pretty much everything about Genova, from the weird design to the like introduction of the Genova felt like Lavos from Chrono Trigger, but like integrated into the plot in a more complex way, which I appreciate. So
yeah, give me Eldritch Horror any day. Like that is just it's Eldritch Horror is everything I ever want, pretty much at all times. I feel like there was one moment that I had a moment that stuck out in my head, and now I've just totally blanked on it, that I really liked. Oh well. I mean, that's all it boils down to.
Can we get an F in chat for Sean's memory?
Yeah, no, I just that type of shit, it gets me going when you get like some weird horror thing going on. On that though, I guess you want to call it here?
You know what? I think we'll call it. I think we're good.
All right. Well, if you are listening to the podcast, I've been Sean McKinda. You can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/helpless_Skippy. You can find my Twitter at Sean_McKinda. If you're in the Twitch chat right now, all that stuff is down below. Discord links, all that good stuff, as well as if you want to listen to more of the podcast, you can find links to that down below as well. I also have a website, isortative.com, and I do writing for 25 Years Later site.com.
And I have been Jackson Keller. You can find me over on my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/JacksonJKeller, but I'm more consistently right here on this Twitch channel for those of you in chat, helpless_Skippy for those of you who are not. And then I'm also over at my friend Connor's channel at twitch.tv/Genghis_Con_, which you can find with that handy Moobot if you're in chat, and if not, then I just said it. So I do Pokemon Nuzlocke both by myself and here with Sean every Wednesday. I do Smash Bros and N64 games with Connor. It's great. Cool. If you want to get more information on the podcast, you can tweet at us at BaDH_cast. It's also where we post updates, all sorts of good stuff. If you don't know, I don't have a job right now, so I'm currently probably going to be doing streaming more, but I'm also going to try and man that podcast a little bit more and engage with people more actively on it, trying to find out things that you want to know about. So, like, if you have ideas for things that you want to see us tweet more about, like, I don't know, movie news or something, let us know. Let me know. I can start presenting more information from there. And what's that? You want to support Sean financially in his time of need? Well, you're in luck, because Beating a Dead Horse has a Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/BaDHcast to get access to special monthly bonus episodes and the ability to request personalized bonus episodes and a special shout out on this podcast, which I will give right now. Thank you so much to Julia, Travis, my dear mother Autumn, and my dear aunt Summer. Yes, they don't have a sister named April or Winter or anything. So,
as always, thanks to Lords of the Highway for use of our theme song. It is Suicide Alternate Take off the album High Octane Low Expectations. They're a great band. Go check them out. They're on Spotify, all those good places. Also, thanks to 25 Years Later site.com for the endorsement and stuff. They are a group of really cool people doing some really cool writing about a whole lot of stuff. So go check them out. Go give them your clicks, your reads. There's a bunch of people more talented than me over there, so you should definitely go read what they say. And next week, we'll be back talking about Brightburn. We'll see how that movie goes. It might be good. Early reviews are looking at least somewhat positive. So, who knows? For now, though, thanks for hanging out, everybody. Bye.